Hi, it's Katrina. The artifacts you're about to see defy all reason, make no sense, and are downright shocking. From evidence of a prehistoric nuclear reactor to a bizarre piece of Cold War history found on the beach, here are some artifacts that could change history. An ancient screw. What's crazier to you? The remains of a nuclear reactor from nearly 2 billion years ago, or a screw found embedded in a chunk of rock from 300 million years ago? Check out this mysterious object discovered in Russia by a team of researchers known as the Russian Scientific Organization. The group is notorious for exploring sites related to extraterrestrial activity. When they went to a location in Russia where people had made strange reports of an asteroid strike, they stumbled upon this artifact. But is it a screw? Or could it be a fossil? Scientists x-rayed the mystery object, claiming they found another screw still hidden inside the stone. They're convinced this is a piece of forgotten technology left behind by a civilization that went extinct before the dinosaurs had even showed up on the scene. All the same, mainstream scientists are calling the Russian researchers delusional. The real explanation could be a little more down to earth. The fossilized screw happens to look a lot like a fossilized crinoid, a creature of the ancient sea with a screw-like body. It might also be a sea lily, a type of crinoid anchored to the seabed, looking kind of like a sunflower stalk wavering in the gentle current. When fossilized, these sea animals look like large nuts or screws. The first crinoids appeared on Earth roughly 488 million years ago. Since the mysterious rock found south of Moscow is between 300 and 320 million years old, it does fit the timeline for being a fossil. Is this thing an out-of-place artifact or a long-dead sea creature? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The 1.7 billion-year-old nuclear reactor. There is a nuclear reactor that scientists have dated to be almost 2 billion years old. Yes, that's B as in billion. Either this thing is a clear indicator of alien intelligence, an advanced antediluvian human civilization, or natural processes that defy logic. To make a nuclear reactor run, you need uranium. Specifically, you need uranium-235. The issue with that is, well, it doesn't exist in nature. At least, it's not supposed to. All natural uranium available today contains only 0.720% of U-235. To make a nuclear reactor work, the uranium needs to be 3% U-235. This is why you hear the term enriched uranium, because scientists have to juice natural uranium to make it work in nuclear processes. In 1972, physicist Francis Perrin was at a nuclear fuel processing plant in the south of France dealing with a peculiar problem. He was holding in one hand a piece of radioactive natural uranium ore, taken from a mine in Africa. This piece of uranium contained only 0.717% U-235. I know it seems like a small difference, only 0.003% less than normal, but this was a shocking conundrum. It seemed to Francis that the piece of uranium had already undergone artificial fission. In other words, someone or something had forced the U-235 isotopes to split in a nuclear chain reaction. Without admitting the unthinkable, like aliens for example, the only explanation was a natural nuclear reactor. Francis decided the uranium ore had undergone fission by itself thanks to geological processes in the Earth. Here is the accepted scientific explanation for why the uranium had already undergone fission. I'll tell you what I know, and then you can decide. 1.7 billion years ago, groundwater flowed freely through the bedrock, moistening the uranium-rich ore deep in the ground. Then there was a great oxygenation event that plunged a massive amount of oxygen into the groundwater, dissolving the uranium. This naturally started the chain reaction, very much like how chain reactions start inside a human-made nuclear reactor. The chain reaction continued for thousands of years deep in the Earth, dissolving the uranium long enough to leave it with 0.717% U-235. Either that or something more exciting is at play here. The alternative theory is that the uranium ore is a remnant of a much older civilization that mastered nuclear power almost 2 billion years ago. And now for a quick break because it's shout out time. I want to give a huge thank you to Rina Barreto and her son for the generous super thanks. Hi guys! If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The mystery of the Dixon relics. For 3,800 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest structure in the world. It is the only surviving member of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, yet so much of it is still a mystery. Did you know that there have only been 3 artifacts found inside the pyramid? Each one has its own strange story. Wayneman Dixon was one of the most influential British engineers of the late 19th century. He was obsessed with ancient Egypt and worked tirelessly on uncovering the secrets of the Great Pyramid. Dixon discovered a pair of shafts leading out from the Queen's chamber within the pyramid, similar to the shafts connecting the King's chamber to the outside wall. However, he is remembered today for the 3 artifacts he found in 1872: a small dolerite ball, a copper hook, and a fragment of cedar wood. Together, the 3 artifacts are called the Dixon relics. Dixon found them with his friend James Grant while exploring the air shafts connected to the Queen's chamber. The hook was in the south shaft, the stone ball and the piece of wood were in the north shaft. The most famous monument in the world, and these are the only 3 things found in it. Each one is super random, and no one knows what they were used for. The hook is rusted and green, looking like it could have been part of a tool. The dolerite ball looks like it could have been put in a sling and launched at Goliath's head. The chunk of cedar wood could have come from absolutely anything. Statue, a boat, a piece of scaffolding. There's no way to say. Even with such limited information, theories are numerous. Some think they were ritual objects. Others have suggested they were astronomical tools. The most likely explanation is that they were construction materials left behind by the builders. Perhaps the weirdest part is that when you try to find information on these relics, it's really difficult. Almost nothing is known about what was in the pyramid prior to Dixon's search. Where are the rest of the artifacts? Even in pillaged tombs, looters left behind the junk they didn't think was worth anything. When it comes to the Great Pyramid, there wasn't a crumb left big enough for a mouse. There is one important thing you should know. The mysterious chunk of cedar wood was radiocarbon dated to roughly 3341 BC. The wood is about 500 years older than the pyramid. How can this be? Was the wood recycled from an older building? Was it part of an artifact buried with King Khufu that had already been around for 5 centuries? There is something out of place with these artifacts, and nobody knows what it is. Do you have any suggestions? The sunken city of the Chandeleur Islands. Amateur archaeologist George Gill has taken 44 trips to a site that few other people believe has any importance. Yet, according to George, the site is home to some 12,000-year-old sunken ruins, and it is right off the coast of America. George's site of intrigue is located in the Gulf of Mexico, about 50 miles from New Orleans, near the Chandeleur Islands. There are mysterious granite mounds under the water, which most experts have dismissed as natural features. But George isn't easily dissuaded. George believes the hundreds of granite mounds are the ruins of buildings that have been covered with sand and silt over thousands of years. He says there is a pyramid at the center of the city, a pyramid in the Gulf of Mexico. Do you believe it? George has dubbed the sunken metropolis Crescentis. He says that somebody floated billions of stones down the Mississippi River and built the city out in the Gulf. This would have been when the water level was significantly lower. Then, 12,000 years ago, when a flood raised the water level in the Gulf of Mexico, Crescentis was submerged and its people destroyed. The only people who seem to take George seriously are the locals. George has gone on several excursions with a local shrimper named Ricky Robin. The things Ricky has seen defy any logical explanation. Ricky said that when his boat floats directly over the tip of the pyramid at the center of Crescentis, the instruments in his boat go haywire. The compass starts spinning, the electronics freak out. It's as if there is an energy interference radiating from the pyramid. The pyramid that everyone else says is nothing but a normal rock. Other local fishermen are also aware of the anomaly. For years, fishermen have been catching weird square rocks in their nets that look as if they were dislodged from the foundations of a structure, like pieces of stone that would have crumbled off a temple or something. There are other explanations that should be considered. In the 1980s, a study from Texas A&M suggested the underwater granite came from shipwrecks. Spanish and French ships dumped loads of granite on their way to New Orleans because their ships were just too heavy, and this could explain why the granite blocks piled up into the shape of a pyramid. What do you think is the explanation for this mystery? Is there a real sunken city in the Gulf of Mexico, or is it just a pile of rocks? The secrets of Gilmerton Cove. Near the southern end of Scotland's city of Edinburgh, underneath a modern suburb, there are a series of ancient sandstone caves that have been puzzling local historians for years. The system is known as Gilmerton Cove, and despite decades of scientific research, nobody has been able to make sense of the underground enigma. There are some vague records of the caves going back to the 18th century, but they haven't been much help. Some think the caves were used as a druid temple, and others think they were carved by secretive alcoholics. If we're going to unravel this mystery, let me start with Edinburgh itself, one of Scotland's most picturesque cities. Edinburgh, its ancient castle, and its creepy caves are situated just underneath Arthur's Seat. Arthur's Seat is a huge rocky hill that is known as one of the earliest sites of human habitation in the British Isles. What I'm trying to say is that Edinburgh is super old. The suburb of Gilmerton is also old. It was originally a mining town before the mines were abandoned and it was gentrified into a modern neighborhood. Local records first mention Gilmerton Cove in 1721. The local church made a note in their records about a blacksmith named George Patterson who was selling alcohol on the Sabbath to people in a cave under his house. That kind of seems like it would be the end of the mystery, right? A blacksmith was selling illegal booze out of a cave. Big whoop! Only there is so much more going on here. In 2017, scientists at the University of St. Andrews used ground-penetrating radar to look underneath the underground passageways. The results of the radar scans indicated a huge network of corridors and chambers going much deeper than anyone had imagined. Unfortunately, nobody has found a way to get into these extra chambers. There is no telling how far down into the earth they go. Here's a snapshot of one of the passages, image courtesy of John Dale. Does this look like somewhere a blacksmith sells booze, or does it look suspiciously like a place where hooded figures met to discuss their secrets? The part of Gilmerton Cove currently open to the public is a 40-foot-long tunnel carved by hand out of the sandstone. It's one long corridor with caverns branching on either side, looking sort of like an underground prison. Archaeologists have found openings that may have been used as skylights. They've discovered drainage gutters, a deep vertical pit that could have been used as a cistern, and ventilation shafts. Mainstream scientists say this was all done by the blacksmith. But why go through such trouble just to sell a bit of alcohol? It didn't make much sense to F.R. Coles either. In 1897, Coles, who was the assistant keeper of the National Museum of Antiquities in Edinburgh, became obsessed with the caves. After years of investigation, he concluded there was no way a single man had carved such an extensive cove in just a couple of years. F.R. Coles suggested the caves to be significantly older. In modern times, Julian Spalding of Glasgow's Museums and Galleries made the same assessment, saying the caves are at least 2,000 years old. Spalding believes they were carved by a shadowy cult of druids back when Rome was still trying to conquer the British Isles. One of the weirder artifacts found in the cave was a long table with a bowl carved into it, looking sort of like a baptismal font. Could this have been used by the druids in their strange underground rituals? The Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery is the most famous out-of-place artifact in the world, an ancient clay jar that could prove that people used electricity 2,000 years ago. Even if you've heard of this baffling relic before, keep watching, because there's one thing you might not know. The battery was found in 1938 by a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig. He was doing archaeological work in Kujut Rabu, not far from Baghdad. In the ruins, he uncovered a simple clay jar covered with an asphalt stopper. It seemed ordinary enough until Wilhelm looked inside. There was an iron rod tucked within a copper cylinder. This thing contained all the ingredients for making a natural battery. If true, it means Persians had access to electricity 1800 years before the first modern battery was invented. What I'm here to tell you is that it's most likely true. The evidence in favor of the ancient battery being legit is overwhelming. In the days following World War II, Willard Gray became fascinated by the Baghdad battery. He made a replica, filled it with grape juice, and produced about 2 volts of electricity. It wasn't enough to power a hybrid truck, but it was still an electric charge. Even the legendary Mythbusters tested the battery. They took 10 replica jars, filled them with lemons, and hooked them all together. The 10 jars produced 4.5 volts. All the evidence points to the Persians figuring out how to produce an electric charge. But what did they need that charge for? That's the most intriguing mystery, the one question that really needs to be answered. Did they create the battery to zap their friends? It's not like they had appliances they needed to power. Dr. Paul Craddock, an expert in metallurgy who works for the British Museum, has come up with an amazing answer to the mystery. Paul thinks electricity was used as a trick in a temple. Batteries were wired to a stone statue of a god. Then, when people came to touch the statue, they would get a small shock and see a tiny blue flash of light. Temple priests could have used these batteries as a way of encouraging belief. People who witnessed the blue flashes and felt themselves be zapped by a seemingly inanimate object would have been awed by the power of the god. I could have ended on a happy note. Instead, I'm going to ruin all your hopes and dreams. The truth is that most archaeologists agree the most likely explanation is that the jar was used to hold scrolls, as mundane as that is. Almost identical jars have been found in other ancient Persian cities, all of them used as storage vessels for paperwork. In 2012, Professor Elizabeth Stone said not one serious archaeologist she knows believes the jars were used as batteries. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. The last thing you need to know is that it's impossible to study the jar anymore. The Baghdad battery was stolen in the 2003 US invasion of Iraq, and nobody has found it yet. The unexplainable wheel. When exactly was the wheel invented? Was it the Sumerians 5,000 years ago? Was it the Egyptians, the Romans? Or could it have been a forgotten civilization from 300 million years ago? The reason I bring this question to you is that in 2008, something impossible was found inside a coal mine in the Ukrainian city of Donetsk. Embedded in natural sandstone was a wheel at a depth of about 3,000 feet. Workers had practically tunneled all the way to China, and there, stuck in the ceiling of one of their tunnels, was the perfect imprint of a wheel. The rock the miners were digging dates to the Carboniferous period, which was between 360 and 300 million years ago. The age of the rock suggests that the wheel disintegrated over many eons through a process called diagenesis. This is fairly common, with fossils often succumbing to it. Even the most hardened objects, like a steel wheel for example, can disintegrate simply from being trapped in rock. The material dissolves as sediments are lithified into rocks. Just take a look at the picture of this miner posing underneath the wheel imprint. The photograph is believed to have been taken by Deputy Chief V.V. Kruzilin, then shared with the foreman of the site, S. Kasatkin. And now I'm sharing it with you. Here's a closer shot. You can see the perfectly circular outline of the wheel, its spokes, and the hub in the center. I know that sometimes rock formations can look like things, human faces, dinosaurs, doorways, but this is truly shocking. It doesn't just look like a rock formation in the shape of a wheel. This really looks like a wheel was lodged in the rock. Sadly, the mine is currently closed. It's impossible to access the object, leaving us with nothing but these pictures. The equipment is dismantled and the wheel has been lost to eternity. Considering it was 3,000 feet below the surface, it really makes you wonder what other surprises might be buried way, way beneath our feet. The East Bay Mystery Walls. If you happen to live in California, there is a mystery you can explore all on your own if you have a set of wheels and a sense of adventure. For more than a century, people in California's Bay Area have been fascinated by the strange stone walls scattered along ridges through the Berkeley Hills. These are the East Bay Mystery Walls, actual walls that have eluded all explanation. I know that most mysteries appear in faraway and exotic places you may never visit, but this one is in California, a short trip from major cities. Some of the walls are in straight lines, some form unusual angles, and some are even connected to curious rectangular ruins. You'd think with all the scientific institutions in California, someone would have figured these walls out, yet nobody knows who built them, how old they are, or what purpose they served. It's possible they were built by a vanished tribe of Native Americans. Some think they were the walls of an ancient city. Others believe the walls were made by castaways sent adrift in the ocean after the destruction of Atlantis, landing in North America and building early cities. Here's a picture of one segment thanks to Dan Brecky. The photo shows the stone wall moving along the top of Monument Peak in Ed Levin County Park, not far from Milpitas. It looks out of place, right? The wall segment does not look like it belongs with the rest of the landscape here. People have been saying the same thing since at least the 1800s. The oldest known mention of the mysterious walls is from an article in the Sunday San Francisco Chronicle, dated March 8, 1896. The article states that researchers had already been long baffled by the walls, meaning people in the area had already known about them for years. The article mentioned the walls could have been made by the Aztecs of Mexico, maybe as a defensive blockade, or maybe the walls came from a long-forgotten race of people. I can't give you much more information because there just isn't any. It's been centuries, and there is so much technology available, but still, scientists don't know if the walls are 1,000 years old or 10,000 years old. If you have any information, be sure to share it in the comments below. The strange jars found in India. Archaeologists in South Asia stumbled upon a crazy site covered in giant stone jars that make no sense. This is one of the weirdest discoveries that has ever been made in India. The artifacts haven't been dated, so nobody knows how old they are. The giant jars appear to have been left behind by a society that nobody even has a name for. The ancient craftsmen of the stone jars disappeared roughly 3,000 years ago. If you're a fan of all things mysterious, you've most likely heard of the Plain of Jars before. It's a sprawling field in Laos that is covered in gigantic stone jars. Although it is mysterious at first glance, the jars in Laos served an obvious purpose. Skeletal remains were found in most of them, suggesting they were used as coffins. It seems strange to us, but is it really that weird when you think about it? The jars in Laos were part of a mortuary ritual, one practiced by a unique culture that flourished in a remote, landlocked jungle sandwiched between Thailand and China. Burying people in stone jars isn't that different from burying people in wooden boxes. The mystery jars of India were first seen in 1929. 6 sites were discovered by a pair of curious English researchers named James Mills and John Hutton. In the 1930s, the British anthropological community started to get excited about the jars. Researcher Ursula Graham Bauer found more jars and suggested they were funerary urns, just like the ones in Laos. But then the archaeological community forgot about the jars. Nobody went to examine them again until 2014. A group of researchers with the Archaeological Survey of India tried to relocate the sites from the 1920s and 30s. They did find a few of them, plus some new ones, but others were swallowed by the jungle and lost entirely. By this year, 2024, a total of nearly 800 stone jars were found at over 10 sites spread across India. It's possible that whoever made the stone jars in India also made the stone jars in Laos, and others found in Indonesia. This could have been a massive civilization spread across unprecedented territory. I'm talking about a civilization even larger than the Khmer Empire of Angkor, and even older too, dating back 2,000 years or more. But if that's true, what happened to this great civilization? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ancient stone tools in Ukraine. Ancient stone tools have been found in Ukraine, shocking scientists and leaving them speechless. The ancient tools are out of place because they are so old that humans shouldn't even have been in Europe yet. The primitive instruments might just change history. What do ancient stone tools look like anyway? To the untrained eye, they look just like rocks. Take a look at this one, the photo by Roman Garba. Would you, if you saw this rock lying on the ground, recognize it as an ancient tool? Archaeologists found the tool I just showed you and other ancient artifacts at a quarry in Korolevo. Prehistoric humans took chunks of volcanic rock and chipped them into scrapers and whackers, tools for cutting and bashing. That was about the extent of human sophistication 1.4 million years ago. By the way, these tools are 1.4 million years old. That's a huge deal because there are no fossilized remains of humans in Ukraine from 1 million years ago. Not just Homo sapiens, any human species. As far as science is concerned, there were no Neanderthals, no Homo erectus, no members of the human family tree in Europe before 1 million years ago. Geophysicist Mads Knudsen from Aarhus University in Denmark said the tools are the earliest evidence of any type of human being in Europe. However, you should keep in mind that stone tools were found in Spain from roughly 1 million years ago. And the earliest stone tools of them all were found in East Africa, dated to 2.8 million years ago. What humans were doing in Ukraine 1 million years ago is a mystery. Secrets of the Cold War. On a beach in Cape Cod just this year, 2024, something unexpected washed up in the sand. It was identified as an artifact from a very secretive program conducted during the Cold War. In early April, the object appeared overnight on Marconi Beach in Massachusetts. Staff at the beach were trying to remove the object before it got swept away by an incoming storm. The Cape Cod National Seashore posted a picture of it on their Facebook page. This was no ordinary piece of beach trash. It was a relic, the body of an aircraft developed under intense secrecy during the 1940s and 50s. Of course, beach workers didn't know what it was right away. To them, it looked like a missile, or maybe part of a crashed spaceship. It was only when park historian Bill Burke saw the object that it was identified. Bill said the relic is a fuselage of an RCAT, or a remote control aerial target. If you haven't heard of an RCAT, you're not alone. These were drone planes used for target practice at Camp Wellfleet. The RCAT was one of the earliest versions of a drone. Planes would take off from what's now a defunct runway in the forest of Wellfleet, equipped with an RCAT. The aircraft would then shoot the drone like a rocket at about 60 miles per hour. Somebody nearby, normally standing at the edge of a cliff, would remotely operate the drone while the plane tried to shoot it down. It was like skeet shooting for airplanes. The fuselage found on the beach was likely attached to one of the drones that got shot down and sank. It looks like it took the tide about 80 years to push it up onto the sand. Rama's Bridge. The myth of Rama's Bridge is going to leave you desperate for answers. This amazing place, also called Adam's Bridge, is as real as it gets. It's a chain of natural limestone shoals leading from the northern tip of Sri Lanka to the southern tip of India. While it's not possible to walk across the bridge today, it would have been once in ancient history. Geological evidence shows the land bridge did connect the two great land masses. Today, some parts of the bridge are dry, others are underwater, but the water is barely 3 feet deep at its deepest. Check out this aerial photograph. You can see the 30-mile-long bridge clear as day, even if some parts of it are sunken. The reason this natural bridge feels so out of place boils down to religion. In the Islamic faith, this is the place where Adam fell to earth. After Adam plummeted from the sky, he landed in Sri Lanka and walked across Rama's Bridge to India. That's one story, about 1,500 years old. A much older story is written in the Sanskrit epic Ramayana, nearly 3,000 years old. The Indian version of the story says that the god Rama built the bridge with his own 2 hands so that he could reach Sri Lanka and save his wife Sita, who had been kidnapped by Ravana, the many-headed king of the island of Lanka. Other than the mythological angle, there doesn't seem like much of a mystery here. It's not unusual for a narrow strip of land to connect 2 much larger land masses. There used to be a bridge of ice connecting Siberia to Alaska. In ancient times, you used to be able to walk from England to France. Only there is something mysterious here. You just have to look for it. Geologists have discovered piles of rocks along the bridge that are about 7,000 years old. However, the natural sandbar is only about 4,000 years old. The conflicted dates seem to suggest the rocks were brought to Rama's Bridge from somewhere else. Perhaps it isn't entirely natural after all. What if ancient people extended Rama's bridge to physically connect with Sri Lanka? It could have been part of a massive building project even before the days of the Egyptian pyramids. Maybe there's more to the legends than people think. In 1480, Rama's bridge was destroyed by a cyclone, forever separating Sri Lanka and India. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite out-of-place artifact? Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this. Be sure to subscribe and come back soon, and I'll see you later. Bye!
Mummy and Treasure Haul. In late 2019, scientists announced the strange discovery of hundreds of animal mummies and statues at Sakara, an ancient Egyptian burial ground or necropolis located 19 miles south of modern-day Cairo. The findings date back to the 7th century BC during the 26th dynasty. The collection contained at least 2 mummified lion cubs, marking the first ever find of a complete mummy of a small lion. Unlike mummified cats, lions are extremely rare. There were also mummies of crocodiles, cobras, and birds. Mustafa Waziri, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, was proud to announce the find as a one-of-a-kind discovery. At last update, the pair, along with other mummified felines, were undergoing CT scans and other tests to find out more about them. Antiquities Minister Khaled El-Inani praised the cache of statues that were found with the mummies as a museum in itself. There are just so many things! Included among these artifacts are 75 wooden and bronze statues of animals such as cats, crocodiles, wasps, and falcons. The collection also includes a statue of Neith, the ancient Egyptian goddess of war. But one particular artifact stood out amongst the rest, a scarab statue, which is the largest in the world. This treasure haul represents one of many fascinating discoveries in recent years at Sakara, which served as the necropolis for the ancient Egyptian capital city of Memphis for over 3,000 years. Roman Villa. Metal detectorists have struck again. Recently, some metal detector and historian enthusiasts found Roman artifacts in Wales, near the village of Rosset, so they notified the authorities. Archaeologists came and conducted a remote sensing survey of the area. They identified evidence of a buried structure which appears to be a Roman villa, the first of its kind ever discovered in the country's northeastern region. The site consists of a central courtyard surrounded by several stone and brick structures, and is of a standard architectural style for the time period. Artifacts discovered nearby, which date back between the late 1st century and the early 4th century, indicate that the site was continuously occupied throughout most of the Roman Empire's rule in Britain. The structure's ruins bear evidence of more sophisticated architectural features than researchers previously thought existed there. Archaeologist Dr. Caroline Pudney of the University of Chester said that before this find, we thought that most people in this area either lived in settlements associated with Roman military sites or on farms that used Iron Age roundhouse architectural forms. Now, with this random villa, there is more that needs to be explained. The team plans to continue exploring the site over the next few years in hopes of making more exciting discoveries that will help to give a better understanding of the region during the era of Roman conquest. Submerged soldier. Divers and archaeologists in eastern Lithuania got quite the surprise in Lake Asveja. They came across a medieval soldier's remains 30 feet beneath the water's surface. His personal belongings, including a sword, leather boots, and 2 knives, were discovered nearby. Both the skeleton and the soldier's personal effects, which are thought to date back to the 16th century, were buried under a thick layer of mud and sand, which kept them remarkably preserved over the centuries. The underwater find, which was not a burial, was unique and the first of its kind in Lithuania, archaeologist Elena Prankinaite told LRT English. The soldier may have served in the garrison at nearby Dubingai Castle, which was once an important fortress that protected Lithuania from invaders, and he may have drowned or perished in combat. At the time the man died, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was one of Eastern Europe's most powerful states. But the soldier's cause of death remains unidentified as his remains undergo further analysis at Vilnius University. Meanwhile, the Lithuanian National Museum is conserving his belongings to share with the public. Fossilized footprints. One day over 10,000 years ago, a small person left their footprints behind as they walked with a child in their arms along the shore of what was once Lake Otero in what is now New Mexico's White Sands National Park. The older person periodically shifted the toddler from one hip to the other throughout the nearly mile-long trek while occasionally setting the child down. Then, they dropped the little one off somewhere and returned back to wherever they came from. Evidence of the short journey survives today in the form of the pair's fossilized footprints. Isn't that cool? Discovered in 2018, the trail constitutes the longest fossilized path of human footprints ever discovered, according to the National Park Service. A study published in the journal Quaternary Science Reviews retraces the walker's steps in great detail, noting that the person carrying the child trudged through the thick, slippery mud at the impressive pace of 3.8 miles per hour, an ordeal described by researchers as exhausting. How fast can you walk? Let me know in the comments below. Each track tells a story, a slip here, a stretch there to avoid a puddle, explained study co-authors Matthew Robert Bennett and Sally Christine Reynolds. Besides the human footprints, a sloth and a mammoth crossed their path, reminding us of the wildly different environments that North America's early inhabitants lived in. Imagine going for a hike and seeing a ground sloth the size of a horse and a woolly mammoth. Very different from the landscape and wildlife we have now. The trackway was discovered among hundreds of thousands of human and animal footprints left behind between 13,000 and 11,550 years ago during the late Pleistocene epoch. Designated a mega track site in 2014, the former shore of Lake Otero contains the world's largest collection of Ice Age fossilized footprints. This discovery highlights how something as simple as a path of footprints helps to bring the past to life, giving us a better understanding of the people who came before us. Ancient beech forest. In late August, amid a summer of tempestuous weather, Storm Francis ravaged Wales, bringing heavy rain and unprecedented winds as it hit the coast. As the waters receded from the beach, it carried sand away from the coast, exposing the petrified tree stumps of a prehistoric forest. Numerous legends swirl around these ancient petrified forests, including tales of a lost sunken kingdom called the Sunken Hundred, which allegedly disappeared underwater thousands of years ago. According to legend, the kingdom was lost when the guardian of the sea forgot to close the gates. The ancient trees appeared 15 miles south of Borth, where the beaches are also covered in stumps that were revealed by storms in 2014 and 2019. Sometime between 4,500 and 6,000 years ago, the trees at Borth stopped growing and were covered in seawater and marshland. Researchers are working to determine the age of the stumps, which will help them figure out if the stumps are part of a continuous forest with the trees at Borth, or if they became consumed by the sea at a different time. These events are exciting but alarming to scientists, who see the exposed stumps as more evidence of climate change processes that have been going on for a very long time. And they are noticing that these drastic changes are happening more often. Storms are happening more and more and having a stronger and stronger impact. Earliest bow and arrow. Situated directly below the Indian subcontinent in the Indian Ocean, the island nation of Sri Lanka is home to South Asia's oldest Homo sapiens fossils. Evidence suggests that people arrived in Sri Lanka tens of thousands of years ago, challenging the long-held theory that tropical rainforests were a barrier to migration for humans during the Pleistocene epoch. In a study published earlier this year, an international team of experts described a collection of artifacts found in a rainforest cave in Fa Hien Lina that they believe reflect the earliest bow and arrow use outside Africa. Dating back roughly 48,000 years, the items consist of 130 bone arrowhead tips, which were likely used for catching fast-moving prey. The previous earliest evidence of bow and arrow hunting in Southeast Asia dates back roughly 32,000 years. Other bone tools indicate that people may have crafted nets and clothing, contradicting the theory that early humans innovated according to needs associated with their environments. Simply put, researchers have long believed that humans started making clothing in response to cold weather, but the discovery of possible textile-making tools in a hot and humid environment suggests otherwise. It might not have been cold, but honestly, who wants to be naked in the jungle? I would try to make some sort of textile clothing too, just to not get eaten alive by mosquitoes. These groundbreaking discoveries highlight the historical tendency for experts to overlook certain environments, including tropical rainforests, in their attempts to trace the origins of early technological innovations. Muddy statues of Cairo. Recently, archaeologists unearthed an ancient statue in Egypt, though it was a real challenge getting it out. The statue was found in a muddy sewer near Heliopolis, a central location for worshipping the ancient Egyptian sun god, completely interred underneath layers of mud. But this wasn't just any statue. A German-Egyptian archaeological team discovered what they think is a statue of King Ramses II, also referred to as Ramses the Great, and Ozymandias to the Greeks, who was arguably the mightiest of all of ancient Egypt's rulers. The site of this discovery was one of the most important locations for ancient Egyptian religion as well. Heliopolis was the central place where ancient Egyptian cult members prayed to their god, who was at various points identified with Atum and then Ra and Horus. Nowadays, Heliopolis is in danger of being destroyed, due in part to rising water levels and fast development. Right next to the site is what is considered a slum, with a large garbage dump, so archaeologists are worried artifacts underneath might be lost forever. If it actually is Ramses, then this would be one of the biggest archaeological finds in recent history. Officials also found another part of a statue in the same location, which appears to depict Ramses' grandchild, Seti II, who was also a pharaoh. Now, the broken-down statue brings to mind the world-famous poem Ozymandias, written by Percy Shelley, reminding us of the fleeting nature of power. Even the most powerful man in the world was, in the end, a mortal being. Haitian Phoenix button. While metal detecting with his friend on a Puget Sound beach in June of this year, Washington State resident and tugboat worker Phil Massey discovered a Haitian Phoenix button, dating back to the 19th century. The brass object, which Massey unwired from about 6 inches underground, had French text and an image of a bird. Manufactured for King Christophe of Haiti by an English producer during the early 1800s, Phoenix buttons were used as military uniform buttons. The French motto on the buttons translates to, "I am reborn from my ashes," according to archaeologist Doug Wilson of the National Park Service at the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site, who further explained that roughly 1,000 Phoenix buttons have appeared in the Pacific Northwest region over the last 150 years or so. But how do buttons from Haiti end up in Washington State? The prevailing theory of how the buttons ended up so far from Haiti asserts that after King Christophe died, an American named Nathaniel Wyatt bought the Phoenix buttons and traveled to the Pacific Northwest, where he traded them with Native Americans in exchange for furs. Red Lion Playhouse. A team of archaeologists from University College London recently announced the possible discovery of London's earliest playhouse or theatre in the Whitechapel district. Known as the Red Lion, the Elizabethan playhouse was built around 1567. The historical record offers little information about the venue, with 2 lawsuits from 1567 and 1569 between carpenters who worked on the playhouse and the site's proprietor, John Brain, offering the only known written clues about the structure, which reportedly had an outdoor stage and seating. With such little information to go on for so long, experts long debated over the Red Lion's location. The timber ruins that archaeologists discovered in early 2019 and what they now believe were once the Red Lion's stage match the dimensions of the structure detailed in the lawsuits, offering a hopeful clue that they're on the right track. Neanderthal technology. In the modern world, we have a strong tendency to stereotype Neanderthals as far less advanced hominids than our early ancestors, but discoveries in recent years are proving otherwise. Take, for example, a study published earlier this year in the journal Scientific Reports, which describes the discovery of evidence of fiber technology among Neanderthals. The artifact, a cord fragment made from 3 intertwined bundles of fiber, was found attached to a flint tool in a cave-like shelter in Abri-du-Mara, France. Researchers examined the cord, which dates back to sometime between 41,000 and 52,000 years ago, and determined that the fibers used in its manufacture likely came from the inner bark of a non-flowering tree. The cave in southern France where the object was found was once inhabited by Neanderthals, indicating that they created the cord. They were therefore equipped with specialized knowledge of both the plants they used and of the production techniques involved, according to the study's authors. This discovery is just the latest in a series of finds that have scientists rethinking the traditional view of Neanderthals as more or less stupid. Their lengthy existence on Earth, which lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, also points toward their capabilities. Some experts have challenged the study's assertion that Neanderthals created the cord in question, suggesting that it could have been the handiwork of early humans, who began showing up in France 40,000 years ago, around the same time Neanderthals went extinct. Regardless of whether the cord was created by Neanderthals or humans, the artifact is proof of early hominids' ability to think in more complex terms than we often give them credit for, and discoveries like this are helping to reshape our perception of our Stone Age ancestors and relatives. Ancient graves in China. In 2015, construction workers discovered ancient graves in the city of Chengdu in southwest China's Sichuan province. Excavations commenced, and in May of this year, the Chengdu Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology announced that over 6,000 tombs had been found at the site. The graves date back to several time periods and dynasties over a 2,000-year span. This place was used for a very long time. Along with the tombs, which were found on a cliff, were tens of thousands of artifacts, including pottery, Buddha statues, knives, figurines, and other items made from porcelain, copper, iron, glass, coins, and stone. The discovery will help researchers better understand the evolution of funerary customs and religious beliefs in the Sichuan region over many centuries. In an article about the findings, Archaeology World notes that the area has been associated with rebellious generals and independent empires, such as the Shu dynasty, and that it played an important role in Chinese history. The burial's undisturbed state will also come in handy for studying the past, as many ancient graves throughout China are found looted and therefore unable to give experts a complete picture of what the people's lives and deaths were like. Giant kites. In Central Asia, you will probably find one of the oldest animal traps in human history. Known as desert kites, they are found in extremely remote areas, and very few people have ever seen them. Thanks to aerial photography and satellite data, nearly 5,000 desert kites and arrow formations have been found in many countries. From the ground, they just look like mounds of rocks, but from space, you can see the unique shapes they make. Archaeologists believe that these shapes suggest that there were massive herds of animals guided inside, with the corners keeping them essentially trapped. Believed to have been built over generations by nomads some 2,500 years ago, the structures were designed to divert large numbers of animals into pits at the end. These unusual kites caught the attention of science about a century ago, when pilots in World War I announced that there were walls forming large triangles, or polygons, across the deserts of Jordan, Israel, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. Experts have been debating the function of these strange structures ever since. Archaeologist Shamil Amirov uses satellite imagery to map the artifacts in Uzbekistan. He says that they go along the same routes as the antelope migration, guiding thousands of animals into the killing pits. The two lines forming the kite would push the running animals to the end, where there are these big pits with sharp rocks at the bottom that they would fall into. This huge construction project stretching across entire desert areas demonstrates a great collective hunting effort. Today, these traps remain almost intact, waiting for a migration of wild beasts that never comes. Skystone. Skystone is a very enigmatic and mysterious blue rock. There are different reports regarding how it was discovered, but it is believed to be made mostly out of oxygen and was spotted in a gold pit in Sierra Leone in the early 1990s. Diamond and gem prospector David Ledbetter mined and explored gem deposits all over the world and purchased the area in Sierra Leone for gold and diamond mining. Here is where he spotted the bright blue stone. Legend goes that the local people believed the blue stones were beings who once lived in the sky, but were punished by the gods and turned into rocks where they fell to earth, and so they called it Skystone. The discovery is also attributed to geologist and archaeologist Angelo Pitoni, who is said to have found the Skystone in a little town near Freetown, Sierra Leone. When he saw it, he was pretty puzzled, so he sent it off to a number of universities. They all responded, confirming that it was indeed unlike any other stone they found in nature thus far, although they thought that it was artificial. Pitoni wasn't sure what to think. In fact, when its composition was tested, it was found to be over 77% oxygen. It also contained trace elements of silicon, carbon, sodium, and calcium. Sierra Leone natives have seen this type of stone before, but it is said to mostly be found in soil layers which are about 14,000 years old. Could this mean that the Skystone is a relic from an ancient civilization? Its composition raises many questions as to whether it's natural or synthetic. and whether it was formed in the ground or maybe came from the sky, perhaps on meteors. There is now a collection of sky stone owned by the Ledbetter family, and the father and son team, and from what I can tell, have done several documentaries on this mysterious stone. For now, this remains unsolved. Santorini and Atlantis. While the existence of Atlantis is mostly believed to be a myth, some scholars and scientists of the past have claimed that Santorini is a good candidate for the lost city of Atlantis. According to Plato's account, the advanced civilization was punished by the gods as the people became arrogant and greedy. The once circular land of Atlantis is said to have sunk to the bottom of the sea after it was hit by a series of natural disasters. Santorini and its surrounding islands are what is left after volcanic eruption destroyed it in the Bronze Age between 1630 and 1550 BC. The eruption, earthquake, and consequent tsunami was felt throughout the ancient world. This may have led to the fall of the Minoans, who were considered to be very advanced for their time. Researchers are thinking that perhaps the real earthquake and subsequent tsunami is what may have inspired the legend of Atlantis. The tsunami may have been strong enough to run some 600 miles from Santorini to the far eastern shores of the Mediterranean, leaving a large amount of debris in its wake off the coast of Israel. Live Science reported that scientists searching for the underwater city of Caesarea in Israel were diving as far as 65 feet off the coast of the ancient city to see what caused its collapse. They collected long tubes of sediment along the ocean floor with machinery in order to not contaminate anything. Turns out, there's a big layer of about 16 inches of sediment found inside these core samples, deposited roughly around the same time of the tsunami from the Bronze Age. According to experts, given the enormous layer of this sediment, it could not be attributed to just a regular storm because they don't move the ocean floor on this scale. Without a doubt, these findings support the idea that the tsunami and other secondary results of the Santorini eruption were truly massive. This was all discovered by accident. Remember, the divers were studying the underwater city of Caesarea for completely different reasons. The terrifying tsunami affected many ancient cities along the coast of the Mediterranean, and something of this size would have fueled myths and legends of angry gods. Perhaps there is a grain of collective truth to the story of Atlantis, as people in the ancient world felt the devastating effects themselves. Even without conclusive evidence, the story of Atlantis continues to capture people's imagination. What do you think of this theory? Let me know in the comments below. Plague Pit. In 2017, archaeologists discovered what has come to be known as the Plague Pit, which is a mass grave meant exclusively to bury victims of the Black Death. The Black Death was the most notorious and deadliest plague that's ever beset humanity, leading to an estimated 75 million deaths, on low estimates. Some studies put the number as high as 200 million. It started in 1346 and then continued to ravage Europe until 1353. It took around 60% of the British population alone. This plague pit was discovered in North Lincolnshire in Thornton Abbey. The mass grave contained some 48 skeletal remains, of which 27 were children. Thornton Abbey is a very rural area of Lincolnshire, and this excavation reveals further facts about just how difficult it must have been to face a plague like this in the 1300s. Tiny towns were not equipped to handle a disease like this, and the plague pit speaks to that fact. They discovered that this was a plague pit by testing DNA from the remains. When they did, they discovered that Yersinia pestis, the bacteria that leads to the plague, was indeed present. They also found the so-called Tau cross, which was a pendant that was meant to keep the plague away. This pendant is associated with Saint Anthony of Egypt. Unfortunately, the pendant did not protect these poor people. They met a tragic end, but we have learned a lot about the way life was during these times due to this preserved burial pit. The Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin has baffled archaeologists and scientists alike for years. The shroud is a piece of linen cloth that appears to depict the image of a man in the negative, with the dark coloring appearing against the pale linen background. To many, it is a sacred relic that served as the burial shroud of Jesus Christ, used to wrap him after he was taken down from the cross. It is one of the most studied, analyzed, revered, and controversial artifacts in the world. The shroud first appeared in France during the 1350s, when a French knight brought the shroud to a church and presented it to the dean as the burial shroud of Jesus. There is no real way of knowing where it was before that time or how the knight obtained it. Even back then, there was controversy as Pope Clement VII received a letter that an artist had forged the shroud. However, the Pope said the church could continue to display it as an icon, even if it wasn't a historical relic. It survived theft, war, a fire, and who knows what else until it was moved to the cathedral in Turin, Italy. It also survived World War II. In the 1970s, a group known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project argued that the cloth was consistent with crucifixion scars. Another group of researchers claimed that they dated the cloth to sometime between 300 BC and 400 AD. But still, others retorted back with their own research, claiming that it couldn't be that old, it was more like 1260 to 1390, and that the blood on the cloth couldn't have originated from Jesus. This year, due to COVID-19, the shroud was shown via live stream for Easter. It was last publicly displayed in 2015, and since Italy was hit quite hard, the Archbishop agreed to the thousands of requests he received from people wanting to see it. Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas, which means giant book, is a gigantic manuscript from medieval times which weighs around 165 pounds. It is actually the largest medieval manuscript in the world, believed to have been made by just one monk working alone. The 620 pages are almost 3 feet in size. It's not just the size of this manuscript that's kept researchers glued to its pages for years, but the content. It has both the Old and New Testaments, essays covering everything from exorcisms to grammar to medicine, along with incredibly large drawings. One of the most perplexing things about it is an enormous full-page drawing of the devil himself, and the Codex Gigas has come to be known as the Devil's Bible. For such a sacred text, how did such a powerful representation of the devil end up inside? Legend goes that the monk broke his vows and was going to be punished. To save himself, he promised to create a book that would glorify the monastery forever and would contain all known human knowledge at the time. Instead of praying to God for help, he prayed to the devil to help him finish the book, and in exchange, he would give up his soul. The devil drawing was added as a bit of a thank you to the Dark Lord. Regardless of what really happened, the National Library of Sweden reports that if the scribe worked for 6 hours a day and wrote 6 days a week, this means that the manuscript could have taken about 5 years to complete. However, as a monk, he may not have been able to work as often, and just making the lines to write on later would have taken hours, not to mention each illustration. The likely estimate is that it most likely took between 20 and 30 years to complete. Definitely a life's masterpiece. The manuscript appeared in the 16th century during the 30 Years' War, when the Holy Roman Emperor's castle was plundered. It can now be found in the National Library of Sweden. You can actually read the whole thing for yourself at the worlddigitallibrary.org. Main Penny. In 1957, a couple of amateur archaeologists turned history upside down when they came upon a truly strange artifact. They were hanging out on a friend's property in Maine exploring the coastline, and they came across a bunch of stone chips, knives, and fire pits. Over the years, they kept going back to explore even more when the weather was good, and it became known as the Goddard site. However, one discovery stood out from all the rest. They had found a coin, and not just any coin. For years, the friends thought that they had found an English coin from the 12th century in Maine, long before the first English settlers came to America. While that would have been a curious find in itself, the story hit the papers with an article called, "Were the English the First to Discover America?" Professional coin experts saw the photograph and knew exactly what it was: a Norse penny dating back to sometime between 1065 and 1093. But wait, how did a Norse coin from hundreds of years ago end up on Maine's shoreline, inexplicably sailing across the entire Atlantic Ocean? If taken at face value, it serves as evidence for the idea that the Vikings sailed across the ocean and were the first people to arrive to North America centuries before Columbus. But the only Viking site in North America is in Newfoundland, and at the Goddard site, no other Viking artifact has turned up. What this could also mean is that the Vikings made contact with people in North America and may have traded with them, with the penny getting passed along from trader to trader, only to end up very far from home. There are actually a number of famous Icelandic stories which tell about quests to an unnamed land filled with green pastures. Perhaps it was this area that they were referring to. The penny itself has passed from researcher to researcher, with some believing it is real and others really doubting its authenticity. It doesn't look like coins from other Viking hoards and may have been planted there by the friends. It's hard to say if it was an honest find and whether this is evidence of Vikings arriving to Maine. Hoard in Kazakhstan. The Tarbagatai Mountains are a remote and desolate place, but not too far for archaeologists. They recently uncovered a treasure trove of gold artifacts numbering in the thousands. It is believed to belong to royal members of the Sakara society, Eurasian nomads that were believed to be Scythians. The area is covered with around 200 burial mounds, mostly belonging to royals or powerful warlords. The Sakara were quite sophisticated and gave very lavish funerals with jewelry like beads, necklaces, precious stones, gold deer figurines, and many other valuable items, as well as spears, chains, and weaponry. These jewels were discovered within a burial mound deep inside of the mountain range, and researchers have dated the find to around 2,800 years ago. Archaeologists are expecting to find the remains of an elite couple, but so far have not yet opened the burial mound. When you consider just how long ago these things were made, the workmanship on the artifacts is very impressive. They indicate that these people were using incredibly advanced, intricate techniques for making jewelry and ornate clothing. They also were known for mining and extraction. There are many more burial mounds in the area, but most of them were robbed and looted long ago. Even Peter the Great got his hands on some Scythian treasure. Experts are very excited to have found this preserved mound and think there is a good chance to find more in the future. Right now, the 3,000 artifacts have been declared priceless. Oldest handwritten document. The written word hasn't been around forever, so when archaeologists discover old tablets with inscribed text, they're right to get giddy. That's why when archaeologists uncovered a set of tablets in London with text on them, they were very curious to see where they came from. But they turned out to be older than anyone might have initially imagined. They actually turned out to be the oldest documents with handwriting on them that archaeologists have ever found in Britain. They were discovered in a place you'd never expect, directly underneath a 1950s-era block of offices. Excavators were clearing the block to make way for Bloomberg's new headquarters in Europe when they found the tablets in the mud. These documents are thought to be various notes and agreements that were written some 2,000 years ago. They are the direct writings of the people who lived in the area and give us a glimpse into the Wild West that was this part of the Roman Empire, as NPR.org put it. They give us a glimpse into a carpet-bagging community in the new Wild West frontier of the Roman Empire, said Roger Tomlin, the expert on early Roman writing who spent a year poring over the faint scratches on slivers of fir wood recycled from old barrels. Now known as the Bloomberg tablets, the earliest tablet dates between 43 to 53 AD, which was the first decade that Romans were ruling over the area. 2,000 years later, the tablets are still around thanks to the wet mud that protected the wood from decaying. One is telling a man that everyone in the market is talking about how he lent them money, and another one that is evidence of schooling, as it contains some letters of the alphabet to practice. The technology of its time. Very different from ours, definitely. These tablets are a valuable and intimate peek into this period, and priceless for many scientists and anthropologists. The Museum of London Archaeology, or MOLA, will be putting the 700 artifacts found at the site on display for the public to see what life was like in the same place 2,000 years ago. Thanks for watching! Which discovery was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Mine was definitely the Sakara burial mounds. I definitely want to learn more about them. Remember to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up for more. See you next time! Bye!